Lawyers of Reddit, what's the worst way you've seen a person screw over someone else in court, whether it be criminal, civil, or divorce proceedings?
Not the worst, but one that sticks out that they did to themselves. Woman shows up to court in a "It's party time bitches. Drink up" t-shirt. She was there for her first appearance on a third DUI charge. Judge was not in a humorous mood that day.
This thread is making me feel smarter by the second.
It doesn't take much to avoid being stupid, but hey, that's how the average is made up.
Think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that. George Carlin.
Nasty custody fight. The ex-wife was a lawyer and represented herself. The ex-husband had a pretty shitty lawyer. She kept hauling things back to court trying to get more benefits from him, and his lawyer just let it keep happening, and it was destroying his life. Allegations of child abuse, was taking so much money that he could barely afford a shit apartment and couldn't afford a car, which both figured in later for custody. Finally, the ex-wife's father, also a lawyer, asked to meet with the judge and mentioned a few things that he knew were going on. One of the children was manic depressive, and the ex-wife would take him off his meds before it was the ex-husband's turn for custody. The child abuse allegations were from the ex-husband trying to restrain the child during a manic episode because he wasn't medicated. The ex-wife had intentionally timed the child abuse allegation to fall just before the holidays so the ex-husband couldn't see the kids for Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. She bragged to family that it would do the maximum emotional damage possible doing it then. The ex-wife had forged documents to overstate the ex-husband's income when alimony was being determined. Oh, and the ex-wife was sleeping with the ex-husband's lawyer. Edit, forgot to give the outcome. The ex-husband's lawyer was reported to the bar, not sure what happened there. The judge ordered a review of everything and arranged for a new lawyer for the ex-husband. It was looking like the alimony would be vastly reduced and the ex-husband was going to get custody. But then the ex-husband died, blood clot, 2 months later. Years of being screwed over, finally saw a light at the end of the tunnel, but ended up being the wrong light at the end of the wrong tunnel.
This all was horrible, but that last bullet point was just the cherry on top.
She would face ethical investigations and might even be disbarred, if this was found to be true. Say bye to a career.
Both of them would be facing sanctions in that case, not to mention a malpractice suit for the ex-husband's lawyer.
Prosecutor here. I showed up for a bond hearing one morning and the defendant asked the judge if he could say something. The first words out of his mouth were, "Heyo judge, look, like, the reason I hit her was because she disrespect me." He did not prevail.
I once went to traffic court for various tickets, insurance, tags etc. I was not a responsible automobile owner back then. Anyway, on the advice of a friend, I hired an ATI who specialized in traffic court. Best decision. I get called up in front of the judge, and I want to tell him some extenuating information, so I start on my story and the judge just interrupts me and goes, "Hold on. Did you hire this guy?" Points to my lawyer. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then please shut up and let him do his job." The judge, my lawyer and the prosecutor all know each other on a first-name basis. They all work in traffic court, and my lawyer gets me a good deal where I pay a minimal fine and have to reinstate my license and insurance by a certain date, and the judge is like, "Thanks, next."
Ooh yes. I can't tell you how many people shoot themselves in the foot by trying to explain their situation, when the judge and state genuinely would rather give you the benefit of the doubt, and give you a chance to fix things and move on. So many cases where I was like, well, we were gonna do probation but this guy probably just needs to sit in jail, or similar law.
The best results I ever got in traffic court were when the only 3 words I said the entire time were, "Yes, Your Honor," when he called me up, and again when he asked if his decision to drop the no insurance ticket, I didn't have the current card when I got pulled over, drop the severity of the speeding ticket, and to give me a deferment on it was acceptable. He started talking and it seemed to be going well, so I figured just shutting up was my best course of action. Not my case but still my favorite story. Dude screwed himself over when he went to jury trial for a burglary charge and wore the same, distinct sweatshirt he wore the night he committed the crime. Kind of hard to argue the guy in the video isn't your client at that point. Needless to say, he was convicted and spent a few years in dock.
Turns on video. *man yelling on camera, "Look at me. Me, David Garvin, stealing TVs. Who'd believe it? David Garvin, that is not me."
Plot twist, it was actually Darkman.
If you rearrange the letters of David kleptomaniac Dave Garvin you get Darkman. And a few extra letters for the evidence room.
There's a lawyer in my town who has a reputation for being a real dick. He left a very successful firm to go off on his own. He and the firm negotiated which clients he would take, and how eventual fees from those clients would be divided. All seemed fine and dandy. As soon as he's out the door, he sues his old firm saying the deal is unenforceable and that he should 100% of the fees from the clients who came with him. He lost, and appealed, lost again and appealed to the state Supreme Court where they shut his ass down and, in extremely diplomatic language, pretty much called him a dick.
Sounds to me like justice was served.
Gavel strikes.
Case dismissed with extreme prejudice.
More of a case of screwing himself over, but here goes. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. 30-year-old defendant was charged with sexual assault of a child after he got his girlfriend's 14-year-old sister pregnant. She actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, defendant was the father. Defendant wanted probation, prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from not being old enough to consent, sex with the defendant, getting pregnant, etc. Paternity test introduced. Defendant took the stand. His version of events was that he snuck into victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he forcibly had sex with her against her will. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that's the story he settled on. The jury deliberated about 15 minutes before returning a verdict of 17 years. The maximum possible as charged was 20. When interviewed by the attorneys afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again.
He chose to have a jury, a Texas jury, decide his sentencing after he got a 14-year-old girl pregnant. What an idiot.
The real idiot thing was to tell them he forcibly raped her when she already testified to it being consensual as it can be when you are under the age of consent.
Also, WTF? There is a choice between two fucked up situations given these two stories. Either she's scared of him, brainwashed, or he somehow believes lying about raping a minor is the right thing to do in this situation.
Not a lawyer, but when my Phil and Mill got divorced, she wanted to file jointly for the previous year because they were still married. They would have gotten a decent refund. He insisted on filing separately, despite the fact that he would owe $4,000, because he wanted her to also owe the IRS. He did it to frost her ass.
I was in the tax field for years, and I cannot stress enough how spiteful and mean ex-spouses, ex-partners can be. Especially when it comes to money and tax credits, deductions.
My dad bought everything for my brothers he had custody of, but told me I didn't get anything because my mom needed to support me. It was so bad he gave me Nintendo game for Christmas, but said it had to stay at his house, which effectively meant it belonged to my brothers. They always fought over custody, child support, and claiming dependents. They would try to bribe siblings to switch houses. He eventually ended up owing her child support, which he didn't want to pay. I finally lucked out as he bought me a couple thousand in clothes and such, but made sure I always gave him a receipt. My mom freaked out and was furious with me when he turned in all these receipts to fulfill the delinquent child support. She wanted that money. I never felt guilty for it. Her idea of teaching me life lessons was I needed to support myself at 16 since she paid the rent, and if I couldn't afford to go to school dances and such, it was a lesson that you can't always have what you want and life isn't fair and you'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself.
When he turned in all these receipts to fulfill the delinquent child support. I know the whole situation is shitty, but I kind of admire the ingenuity of the way he made sure the support actually went to you.
Sitting waiting for my client and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI. Basically probation. Question: has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? Obvious answer aside, one dude proudly raises his hand. I smoked some dope last night. He did not get probation.
This guy sounds like Jason on The Good Place.
Oh dip.
Guys, it's Pikachu. Destroys Pikachu balloon in excitement.
One time, I saw an indigent defendant who was in custody tell the judge his public defender wasn't working hard enough and he wanted the judge to appoint different counsel. The judge asked him what specifically was the problem and he said, "I don't want a female lawyer. I need a man who can take charge and fight for me," or something very similar to that. The judge, also female, said that's not how it works. Then he starting yelling and getting into specifics about his public defender, just mainly I don't like her, she won't visit me, etc. The judge is annoyed and looks at him and is like, fine, I'll appoint another attorney for you, but because you are not satisfied with your attorney and I need time to appoint you new counsel, I am not going to hear any other issues today and will reset your case. A few days later the judge sends defendant notice of his new appointed attorney, who happens to also be female, and notice of the case reset for 6 weeks. The case was originally set for a bond hearing and the DA and his PD had agreed to release him on an unsecured bond, meaning he would have gotten out that day, if he hadn't thrown his temper tantrum. Instead he waited another 6 weeks in jail just to have another female attorney represent.
Makes me think of Sneaky Pete, where the guy gets himself thrown in jail by attempting to hold up a gun store to avoid being killed. Maybe the defendant wanted to be in jail.
I don't think that was the case, but I worked as a public defender for 6 years, and definitely had a handful of clients that were okay with being in jail. The streets aren't easy and I worked in a mountain town, so the winters could be worse. The saddest case I can think of like that is a client who spent 18 months in before his case was dismissed. He got out with no family, no money, he lost essentially everything he had while in jail. He had lost £60 while incarcerated. He was in his early 60s and died from hypothermia a few months after his release, sleeping in an alley. He weighed 90 pounds when he died and had $5 in his pocket.
If I were homeless I'd 100% want to be in jail during the winter. 3 hots and a cot, as they say.
I've seen a parent use non-existent discipline as a tool to win over their teenage child, so that the child will choose to live with said rubbish parent, and rubbish parent will receive child support from the other parent. It boils my blood seeing someone allowing their 15-year-old child to drop out of school, get high every day, buy them drugs, alcohol, just about every negative thing you could do to a kid, just so they don't have to pay $100 in child support a month. Edit. For everyone commenting on the fact that the child support payments were so cheap, child support amounts in my jurisdiction are relative based upon the paying parenting's situation, income, schooling, assets, etc. They were deadbeats, part-time under the table, seasonal employment and government welfare. Another unfortunate part of the whole ordeal was the party that was losing their child were stand-up people who worked. Meaning that, since they weren't deadbeats and reported their income, the child support payments they had to make to the deadbeat was in the realm of $1,000. Edit 2. This case was years and years ago, the figures I'm giving are just ballpark numbers, but I'm not going to look through my storage locker to see if the deadbeat had to pay $148 and not $100.
This one hits a little close to home, tbh, it's sad, very very sad.
This hits very close to home for me as well. I was in such a situation and sometimes I feel like I still am. I've gotten over the drugs though and I got a job myself.
You're stronger than drugs. They ain't that fun anyways. Way to go, keep it up, we're all rooting for you.
A wife filed for a restraining order because she wanted the house during divorce. Husband has good job, like $200K per year. Employer finds out about restraining order, husband is fired. He was very specialized employee, so only job he can find close to house, ex-wife, and daughter is $50K, house gets foreclosed. Child support at less than $500 per month. Wife has to get job as waitress. 4 cars get repossessed.
I never understood why an employer would care, providing you're not a public figure. What does your non-work life have to do WTH them? An amp, #X200B. Edit. I was more meaning more normal jobs, not ones that require clearances or working with vulnerable people etc. My comment was referring to 9-to-5 office jobs I guess, but thanks for the viewpoints.
I have one of these clauses in my employment contract. Originally it was worded that I would be terminated if arrested. I had my lawyer change it to convicted and they agreed. Part of the reason: I have significant control over company finances and can commit the company to legally binding contracts, and the legal liabilities that come with them. It gives them a defense should I go rogue and commit criminal acts on behalf of the company or acting like I was doing it on behalf of the company.
A restraining order isn't the same as being arrested or even indicted. The standard of evidence for restraining orders is much lower than the standard for criminal convictions.
Kind of a self-screw, but the MPAA entered DVD John's code for breaking DVD copy protection as part of their lawsuit into their evidence, which then became public record. The code that breaks DVD copy protection was now available to the entire world, defeating the entire purpose of their lawsuit.
That really was a moment of genius.
200 IQ move by the MPAA lawyers. He was acquitted of all charges too.
I'm gonna do what's called a pro-gamer move.
Was involved in a custody case where a wife cheated on her husband and had a child as a result. She let husband believe the child was his until she was about 5 years old and they were divorcing. To stop him from getting custody, she convinced the biological father to try to get custody, thinking that if he won she would wind up with the child. Became a huge three-way fight, multiple sets of grandparents involved, attorneys' fees skyrocketed because the case would have been pretty quick otherwise. She couldn't pay her attorney, tried to get the bio dad to, got even messier, etc. Basically there still isn't an agreement all parties will follow. They are in and out of court every year or so. She screwed herself.
That poor kid.
I don't know having a dad still fighting for you even after finding out you're not biologically his. Sounds like a hell of a father.
I feel really bad for the father and the kid. People who haven't